Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Mayday Podcast. I am your co-host, Michelle Kinney. I am here with the lovely, wonderful, brilliant Julie Roginsky, and we are both co-founders of the Mayday Network, which I hope you will like and subscribe. But here on this show, the Mayday Podcast, we will be bringing you conversations with really fascinating people, including newsmakers, like the one we have today. Today, we are joined by Congressman Jim Himes, Democrat from Connecticut's 4th Congressional District, and he is the ranking member on the House Select Committee on Intelligence. Great guy, so smart, and we are honored that he is spending time with us today. So, Julie, hello, welcome.
Hey, I'm so excited that we're doing this. We've talked about launching this podcast for so long, in addition to obviously the Mayday Morning Show and our daily dispatches, which we do every morning except Sundays. But this is a special one because this one allows us to have really in-depth conversations with newsmakers, as you said, with people who are in a position to inform us, in a position to tell us what is really happening. And as we always say on the Mayday Podcast, in a position not to bullshit anybody. And we will have Democrats on, we will have Republicans on. As long as you don't bullshit us, we will have you on.
No bullshit, no lies.
No bullshit, no lies. That's all we're asking for. And so I am so excited to have Congressman Himes here for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is he grew up in the Narnia of central New Jersey, even though he represents Connecticut now. So he, of course, would know that Central Jersey is a real place and exists. And super excited to have the Congressman on. Let's get to it. Congressman, thank you so much and welcome to the Mayday Podcast. We wanted to talk to you about your reaction to seeing the second strike on the Venezuelan shipping vessel that was in the Caribbean. We'll just play that SOT and then get your reaction.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. Under the DoD manual for abiding by the laws of armed conflict, the specific example given of an impermissible action is attacking a shipwreck. Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors. People will someday see this video and they will see that that video shows, if you don't have the broader context, an attack on shipwrecked sailors.
Congressman, did you witness a murder? Is that what you saw?
Well, you ask an interesting question, right? And not to be too lawyerly about this, but if you believe, as I do, that this is not a legal military action, and the reason I believe it's not a legal military action is because it has not been debated, approved, anything by the Congress of the United States. If it's not a legal military action, it would be a murder. And even if it were a legal military action, a declared war, an authorized war, as you heard me say there are rules of war. And you don't get to set aside the rules of war just because the guy on the other side is a really bad guy. That, by the way, tends to be the thing. Usually on the other side are Nazis or communists or terrorists. So you don't get to set aside the laws of war just because the guy on the other side is a bad guy. And here you have, as I said, the textbook example, literally textbook. I'm not using textbook as a metaphor. The DoD manual says you cannot fire on shipwrecked individuals, and by any standard. And, the Pentagon has tried to say, well, they might have swum under the wreckage and found a radio, and maybe they could have radioed something and salvaged some of that is, as they say, that don't hold up in court, right? So no, this was in my opinion, a very serious mistake. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just abiding by the law and being ethical. Those things are kind of abstractions, right? We say we want to do that, but they're kind of abstractions. We do this because someday there will be 2 American sailors clinging to a life raft in some ocean, being watched by the North Koreans or the Chinese or the Russians, who knows? And in that moment, we want to have always sent the signal that we did not send. And those 2 American sailors may pay a horrible price for the fact that we were just a little, well, not a little, we were a lot. We basically ignored the laws that we would hope would protect our people.
Just as a follow-up to that, Admiral Bradley, in a closed-door hearing, said that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth did not give the command to, quote, kill them all, which is what the Washington Post said that he had done. Do you find that credible based on what you know?
Well, I mean, I'll say two things about that. Number one, I have no reason at all to doubt Admiral Bradley. In fact, anyone who's ever worked with Admiral Bradley, and I know a lot of people who have worked with him for years, say that he is a very, very good officer of integrity. So I have no reason to believe that he would lie to the United States Congress. Wouldn't say that about every senior person in the Trump administration, by the way. So point one. Point two, this is actually pretty complicated and gets me out of my comfort zone because at the end of the day, I'm not an armed services guy. I'm an intelligence guy. I will tell you that, yes, the Admiral said that, but one of the things that has not happened, which is required to happen by law, is that whenever you have a military operation like that, the Pentagon is required to provide the Congress with something known as the execute orders. They're like the rules of engagement, what's happening, what the commander's intent is. That needs to be conveyed to Congress, and it hasn't been. And in fact, Congress is angry enough about that in the National Defense Authorization Act that we passed yesterday, we actually stop some money from flowing to the Pentagon until they provide those orders. Why do I tell you that story? It's hard to know for sure what those orders say, who said what to whom. But to come back to your point, I believe the Admiral when he says the Secretary of Defense did not tell me to kill them all.
Got it. Because you are an intelligence guy, I've got to ask you, the White House just released their national security strategy on Friday, which I'm sure you've read or had a chance to digest by now. As an intelligence guy, how much concern should we have from an intelligence perspective about the worldview of this administration and about the ability of our European allies, whether it's the members of the Five Eyes or NATO and others, to share their intelligence with us based on what the White House released on Friday and just more broadly based on their behavior as to how they're disseminating that intelligence since they've come into office?
Yeah, I mean, so big picture here, right? Let's imagine 2 months ago, when this thing is getting written, let's imagine that Vladimir Putin is sitting in the Kremlin, and he's had a few drinks and he's like, okay, let's, if we could make him do it, let's figure out what we would put in the American national security strategy, right? He would say two things. Number one, we really want to reopen and do business with Russia. Let's get him to say that. I know it's going to be hard. Let's get him to say that. Oh, and number two, and here's the really crazy one. Let's get them to attack Western Europe, right? Let's get them to attack and say that Western Europe is decrepit and falling apart and they're not our real allies. And, that would be Putin's dream, right? They'd be like, oh, that'll never happen. Well, guess what? It happened, right? And so like in so many things, you're like, oh my God, is this administration like, look, I don't believe, and I set aside 3 times a day, somebody comes up to me and says, Trump is a Russian agent. No, he's not, but the thing is, there's just this affinity with this awful, awful person and awful regime and a complete failure to understand what you were getting at, which is, the United States and China are pretty, technologically, we're more or less in the same place. Economically, we're more in the less, we're better. They're better at some stuff. You know what we have that the Chinese do not? Incredible allies. That's like a massive differentiating factor. The Chinese have nobody like the United Kingdom that stands with us regardless. They have nobody like NATO. And, and the president is like, yeah, you guys kind of suck. I mean, that's just stupid. And yes, it will ultimately lead to the deterioration of the intelligence sharing and the trust that makes NATO in particular so formidable.
But you already have, sorry, Michelle, and I'll just a follow-up question to that, and I promise I'll let you jump in. You already have you have, whether it's the Dutch or now the British, not sharing their intelligence with us in some matters because they're concerned about our policy towards, they say, Venezuela. I assume, maybe you can't tell us, that it's probably more than that as to how we're disseminating that intelligence. I mean, from a purely national security perspective, based on the fact that you have access to information that the rest of us don't have, which we appreciate you can't share, how concerned should we be about this? I mean, how much of a leaking ship is the United States now that people don't want to share with us things that make not just our allies safe, but make the United States safe?
Yeah. And, it is true that the region, the European countries that have interests in the Caribbean, there's these little leftover colonial enclaves, right? The Dutch, the Spanish, the French, St. Bart's, they've got these presences in the Caribbean. And without being too specific, yeah, they're looking at these boat strikes and saying, we don't think this is cool. And to be super clear here, I think that's being reflected in the kind of cooperation that they have always done with us on counter narcotics in particular. What I also will tell you is that those relationships are very, very deep, and they extend into things like counterterrorism, which largely happens in Africa and Asia and the Middle East. I will tell you happily that while there's very serious concern about what we're doing and maybe damage to the partnerships in the Caribbean, the general intelligence relationships remain very strong for now, right? And so it's worth thinking about. Not just what do we feel when our allies are telling us, hey, take a deep breath and think about whether you're doing the right thing here. But those alliances in the Caribbean really matter, right? And I'll tell you this, probably the one that matters most is Colombia. Over 30 years or more, we've worked very closely with the Colombians, regardless of who's in power there, because of course the cocaine gets made there, right? And so we worked very, very closely with them and very successfully. And okay, maybe we're stopping a bunch of boats from coming north, but man, have we ever done damage to that enormously successful partnership with Colombia? You've heard the president of Colombia just saying, sorry, guys, we're out. That's a huge cost to pay.
So you were briefed on this September 2nd boat strike. If I'm not mistaken, I think with about 6 or 7 people in the room. And I'm so curious to know, number one, did they provide, or did anyone provide any proof that this boat, not that it matters, in terms of legality, but did this boat even have drugs on it? Was it a fishing boat? Who were these people? And second of all, I'm so curious to know what the Republicans are saying, behind closed doors, because there is a lot of whispers about retirements. There's more coming. What are people saying in the House?
Yeah.
On the other side of the aisle.
Yeah. So the headline here is, I have almost no doubt. Well, I have no doubt that boat was carrying drugs.
Okay.
And I have almost no doubt that probably all of these boats have been carrying drugs. Our intelligence community is very, very good.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, right? And that's why, of course, we need to get the thing that we have not gotten yet, which is the briefing on how they're doing the intelligence, how they're doing the targeting. In the counterterrorism world, we every week get sort of updated on what they're doing with respect to terrorists. We've gotten none of that on this. And that's really important, because to date, I have no doubt that these boats have been carrying drugs. What we don't know is who's in them, right? We have no idea, frankly, if maybe one of the people, whatever, 80 or 90 people who've been killed was a U.S. citizen, because I'm not convinced that we know the identities of most or maybe even any of the people who are driving these boats, right? And so, that this is a huge gap in our knowledge, but people shouldn't think that we're just willy-nilly wasting fishing boats and that sort of thing. Our intelligence community is too good for that, but they do make mistakes.
And what are the Republicans saying, behind closed doors? I'm just so curious, because for the average person watching TV, like Mike Johnson says, he never watches the news. He doesn't know what's going on half the time. We all know that's a lie. But the rest of them just kind of go along with everything that Donald Trump says and tells them to do, because they're all scared. But I think a normal person with half a brain knows that there's something wrong here. So, do you think, I'm assuming there's going to be more retirements coming, but what's the chatter?
I'll tell you a funny story, and it's hard to talk about what Republicans in general are doing it, because Rand Paul's over here, and there's a lot of different points of view. But here's the main point of view that I see in the House anyway. Here's the main point of view. There's 2 things going one way and 1 thing going the other. The 2 things going one way are like, oh, whatever Donald Trump wants, whatever he wants, we're going to do that. Yes, of course. It's yes, sir. How high, sir? That's number 1. You pointed that out. Number 2, there's a really dangerous bloodlust in my Republican colleagues. And it's not purely Republican. Look, I think probably a small majority of the American people may be okay with wasting drug runners in the Caribbean, even if it's not legal, right? There's some Clint Eastwood satisfaction, make my day. And so I've heard Republican after Republican saying, we should be doing more of this, just blow them up. It's a bloodlust that is not, I think, consistent with being a lawmaker. So those 2 things are pushing them in one direction. And here's the funny part. Where they get confused? They get confused when okay, we're going to waste lots of drug dealers. You say what? What? The president just pardoned the former president of Honduras who moved hundreds of millions of dollars of cocaine? What? He did what? Oh, I didn't see that on the news. I didn't see that on news. Please don't ask me questions about that. So it's that is creating the electricity, the static electricity that is creating a problem for him.
Hypocrisy is astounding.
I mean, it's just like, this is much more serious, but it's just like, my Republican colleagues over here were, that Friday, 2 Fridays ago, we spent a whole day debating how terrible is socialism bill, because that was the day that Mamdani went to the White House, right? So Republicans put on their costumes and oh, socialism is terrible. And, everybody gets killed. It's terrible, terrible. And the president is right down the street, giving big bromance hugs to a Democratic socialist. And they're just like, oh, it does not compute. It does not compute.
Yeah, it's funny for those of us who live in the New York City media market, which I know you do as well. The New York Post was wall to wall. Mamdani is the second coming of Karl Marx. And then on a dime, the minute Mamdani became best friends with Donald Trump, no more Mamdani on a dime cover. I mean, it's pretty astounding to see how not just Republicans, your colleagues in Congress,
we're going to see Mamdani poolside with a Mai Tai at Mar-a-Lago.
Right. And not to mention tanked the gubernatorial ambitions of your colleague Elise Stefanik as well on that day, because I think that was going to be one of her major talking points. But yeah, it's whatever way the wind's blowing, whatever favors them on any given day is just, nothing matters. Nothing matters.
Yep.
All right. Well, we promised to have you out, so we are so grateful to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Always enjoy being with you guys. Take care.
Thanks. Take care, Congressman. Bye. So, Michelle, I thought that was an incredibly interesting conversation, and the congressman made some news there that I think people should really focus on. This is all being done in Venezuela, presumably because of the war on drugs. That is the excuse, to the extent that the administration has justified this at all, which they really haven't, as the congressman said. But to the extent that they're justifying it a little, they're saying this is because of the war on drugs. What you heard there is Congressman Himes basically admitting, and he is, again, he's the ranking member of the House.
He's in the room where it happens.
He's in the room that the rest of us are not in, and that most of his colleagues are not in.
Mm-hmm.
He just basically said that this whole experience has set back our intelligence sharing, not more broadly, but certainly it affects what our allies are going to do to help us in the Caribbean with sharing intelligence there. We already knew that from the Dutch and the British, but now we're hearing that places like St. Martin, which obviously are French, and other Caribbean islands, which I assume are big intelligence hubs. He basically all but said that for the war on drugs, are thinking twice potentially about cooperating with us on these matters. And of course, he just mentioned Colombia, which took its marbles and went home. And he said that Colombia for decades has been a place that we have worked with very, very broadly and deeply in order to stop the flow of cocaine and other drugs. And now Colombia is basically taking their marbles and going home because it's their fishermen who are getting blown up.
Yeah. I mean, why would you be sacrificing your own citizens, your own people? Again, we're talking about due process here, that we're not giving these people, or we're not even giving it to our own people. I mean, let's be real. We're not giving it to people who cross the border into this country. We're not giving it to the people who ride boats around our shores. We're not wanting to give it to anybody. And that is not the sign of a healthy democracy. I would argue that that's not the sign of a democracy at all. And it is really scary, Julie, that we're not to make light of this, but it's like, the cheese stands alone. And that's what America is going to be. And listen, I think this is part of the end goal for a lot of these people. The Tucker Carlsons of the world want the cheese to stand alone. But that's not how America has ever operated. And that's not how we have ever been successful as a democracy. I mean, isolationism doesn't get you anywhere. Appeasement doesn't get you anywhere. And we're in a really, really, really dangerous place as a country. We're vulnerable, really vulnerable.
And, Congressman Himes said something else that I think is something for people to consider. And I had not really thought about it in those terms until he said it. But of course, it is so self-evident that it's kind of shocking that it's not more talked about. Mm-hmm. And that is that what differentiates us from the Russians and what differentiates us from the Chinese is that we have alliances. And now look, the Russians and the Chinese and India are creating almost their own set of alliances, not necessarily because they like each other. In fact, all of those countries hate each other.
Yeah.
I mean, really going back to decades. I mean, the Chinese and the Indians have fought wars over territory in the 20th century. Certainly you had the Sino-Soviet split back in the 1960s where the Chinese and the Russians hated each other. So these are not countries that have been like embracing each other as a matter of policy for generations. But we have driven them into each other's arms. And now maybe they're sharing intelligence with each other as a result of the United States and its behavior. But what is so absurd is that he's so right. For decades, if not centuries, we have had relationships with the British and the French and basically all of our European allies, up to and including the founding of NATO in 1948, and then certainly after that, and the Five Eyes, that made us unique in that we had friends and allies who shared intelligence with us, not because of a mutual hatred of other countries, although they were threatened mutually by certainly the Soviet Union back in the day, and that's the foundation of NATO, but because we all shared similar democratic ideals and the quote unquote liberal democracy with a lowercase L.
Self-governance, right. Yeah.
Now we're not a liberal democracy anymore. And because we're not a liberal democracy anymore, nobody wants to share, or maybe he said our intelligence relationships are still strong, but I wonder how long those are going to last if we continue to suck up to Vladimir Putin, as he said. And God knows what's happening with Xi Jinping. I assume if the Chinese give a few more trademarks to Ivanka or put some more money into the crypto fund that Steve Witkoff runs and his son runs on behalf of the Trump family, who knows? We are cozying up to the most illiberal dictatorships in the world, whether it's the Qataris or the Saudis or the Russians, and giving the middle finger to our liberal democratic allies. And what that effectively says is that why would they ultimately, if this continues, maybe they're all holding their breath, Michelle, and maybe they're thinking, okay, this too shall pass. This guy will be gone in 3-4 years.
I think that they thought that in 2017, 2018, but I think after the American people said, we're going to give this guy keys to the castle again, I think that they saw the writing on the wall. I think their intelligence probably told them, the risk and the vulnerability that the rest of the world would be under another Donald Trump presidency, especially as it pertains to Russia and the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. I mean, listen, it doesn't take an expert to figure this stuff out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not terribly versed in any of this stuff, but just as an American, as an average person, you can see what's going on here. I mean, this is where, again, the people in the media and there's people in Congress and other places basically telling you, don't believe your eyes, don't believe your ears. That's not what's happening here. Well, yes, it is. Like, yes, it is. Donald Trump is compromised one way or another. He's compromised by the Russians. He's compromised by his own greed and self-interest and narcissism and being a psychopath. I mean, like, look at what's going on with the corruption with his entire family. I mean, for all the Biden crime family bullshit.
Hunter Biden did 1/1,000,000th of what these guys are doing. But I say what I said before because what Congressman Himes said was that he was that the Europeans our relationships with them are strong and deep and that they're not affected. And I would say that's true now. And maybe they're not affected because they're thinking, okay, this guy will be gone in 3 years and we'll just wait it out. I'm not so sure what's going to happen if we continue down this path, because I don't think it's going to just be stopping cooperation in the Caribbean over drugs.
Right.
I think it's going to be all cooperation. I mean, less people forget, and they have forgotten, but this is really critical. And this was widely reported at the time. And then, of course, like everything else, it was memory hold. The day after Donald Trump fired Jim Comey back in 2017, he invited the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Lavrov and Sergei Kislyak, He invited them to the Oval Office. He did not allow any American press to be there. It was he just allowed Russian press, which, by the way, Russian photographers, by the way, all Russian intelligence operatives, just to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, that's just not even a question.
Yeah.
And in that meeting, as reported by the Russians, he joked and they all patted each other back about how he got rid of Jim Comey because Jim Comey was going down the Russia hoax. And he got rid of him. But more importantly, and this is the part that I want people to pay attention to, he told them about ISIS positions in Iraq. Information that he had gotten, it turned out, from Israeli intelligence. He gave it up to the Russians, who were not on our side in Iraq with ISIS. Now, just to be clear, if you're Israeli intelligence, if you're the Mossad, do you ever trust the United States again to the extent that you did before? You'll still share information.
Yeah.
Do you hold some back? Of course you do.
Yeah.
Do the Brits hold something back? Of course they do, because they don't trust this guy not to get blabby.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing too. It's like, do you remember when I remember during his first term, there was stories about him and the guy with the nuclear football down at Mar-a-Lago, and they like let people hold it, and like he'd just be like blabbing intelligence and stuff. He just got a big mouth because first of all, he doesn't care. He doesn't have any respect for the institutions, the laws, any of this. Like none of this matters to him. It's all about showboating. And that's who Donald Trump is. And it's like, it's not even like a conscious decision to be a showboater. He's just a cheesy, mouthy asshole from Queens. And like, that's all this is. And he wants to show off, and he wants people to, pay attention to him and make sure that, people think that he's important. And it's all about him. It's all about him. I mean, this is why FIFA and like countries are giving him like fake medals.
Yeah.
But it's just, Julie, it's again, like I can't imagine that people are still buying this. And again, with the Russia hoax thing too, you're talking about with James Comey, it's like, do people not realize at this point that he calls anything a hoax that he doesn't like?
No, because I'll tell you, we have the series, as you know, Ogle Outman and I over on Substack, about 20 chapters. We did 20 chapters from the heat of the summer. We just ended just now. So it's really cold outside now. We spent 6 months writing 20 chapters. So 20 weeks, almost 6 months. And writing this in minute detail. I mean, again, we don't have access that Congressman Himes has. We don't have intelligence information. This is just the public record.
Right. It's about looking for it and connecting the dots, right?
Correct.
Which is you guys are doing the Lord's work, honestly, because most people in the media are not doing this.
No, and we did it because the New York Times should have done it, but they didn't. So, but I'm saying this to you because when you have that kind of evidence in front of you and you still think it's a hoax, you're just willfully disregarding facts, right? Then you're just a flat earther. See, here's my thing. I would have anybody on this podcast, and I would welcome anybody on this podcast to challenge me on whether what we wrote is accurate and to bring their own data to refute it. But if you're just going to say it's a hoax, then you're just a flat earther, and I'm not interested in you, and I know you're not interested in them. Again, if you're a Republican, I welcome you to come on the Mayday Podcast. I would love for you to come on the Mayday Podcast. I would love to discuss and debate your viewpoints with you on the Mayday Podcast, as I know you would, Michelle.
Yeah, as long as they're based in fact.
As long as they're based in fact. But if you're going to bullshit and you're going to come here with your performative MAGA bullshit, and you're going to call everything that is a hoax, that if you're going to look at the sky and say the sky is purple and it's not blue, then like not interested. Sorry, just not interested. Not interested. The sun rises in the east.
Yeah.
It sets in the west. The earth is round. It is not flat. And Russia interfered in the 2016 election.
Of course.
Fact.
Of course they did. Like,
of course they did. But to Congressman Himes' point, at which point are our intelligence agencies not going to get the information they need because you've got Tulsi Gabbard, who, is at best Russia's useful idiot atop our intelligence agencies. You've got a blabby president who loves and sucks up to Vladimir Putin.
Yep. And mentally ill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, just really quick to bring it back to, you were talking about our allies, especially in Europe, thinking this too shall pass, or if they are, if they're not. And I'm like, again, at this point, there was fertile ground for somebody like Donald Trump to, put some roots in and make some trouble. And 10 years, we're 10 years into this shit. And it's only gotten worse. And the country has become more and more used to it. Like, I mean, it's just, it seems as like, maybe it's because it's Donald Trump that it doesn't shock anyone anymore. And only time will tell, right? Because Donald Trump's not going to be here forever, like on planet Earth, because he's old and he's sick. But, is it him that has the chokehold? I don't know. Will it be MAGA? What will come in his place? But I think either way, there is a large swath of this country who has become just numb to all of it. The shock value has completely worn off. And, the red lights are flashing like danger. And it's going to take a lot for these countries to trust us again, because in their eyes now, they're going to say, well, America's only a democracy, or America's only going to operate in good faith if there's a Democrat in office. Because if there's not now, like, look what happened. So that's volatile. That's not a stable democracy at all.
And I guess the question I would have had for Congressman Himes, and I'll have for any of our leaders who come on the show, is how do they envision this ending?
Yeah.
How does this end?
Because it will.
It will end. But how will it end? How will it end that we ever restore any kind of trust with our allies? That we ever restore any kind of trust with each other? That we ever restore any kind of trust in our institutions? I mean, when I was born in the 70s, you look at the statistics from those days, and people had a fairly high trust of the media. They had a fairly high trust of government.
Yeah.
Certainly after Watergate, government went down tremendously and precipitously, but nevertheless, it was okay. And then slowly but surely, when Reagan came in and they all started chipping away.
Yeah.
And that's what you have now. You have this nihilistic, crazy. It's nihilism. Like, nothing matters. You can't trust anybody except us. We're the only ones that matter. This tribal insanity.
Yeah.
And social media has a lot to do with it. And now AI is going to have even more to do with it.
Oh, gosh.
I do want to have somebody on the show soon to talk about AI, because AI, and I know this is a big concern for people like Melinda Gates and others who understand this and care about this, but AI has the tendency to program skew in ways that the programmers wanted to skew. And you see that with Grok. You see that with what Musk is doing with Grok. Well, it's not just Musk. It's OpenAI. It's all of ChatGPT, which is OpenAI, all of them.
They're all trying to find their own. I mean, Google has their own thing where, when we Google stuff now, like, you actively have to go into your browser and turn this off now if you don't want it. And the thing is, like, the summary, right, where AI is giving you a summary of what it is that you just Googled before it even gives you a news article. So it's giving you like their version of a summary before there's any fact or reporting, right? And so, like, it's dumbing us down, because, like, it's basically telling you don't need to click on those articles below, because all you need to do is listen to us and our version of the truth and trust us. And that's where somebody like, Tristan Harris, he is an expert in this stuff. He has been recently on The Daily Show. He's like all over the place. He's a brilliant guy. If you guys don't know who he is, go find him, because he's really good at explaining this stuff in a way that makes sense to somebody who like AI is confusing. Like AI is, it's like, well, what is it? What, is it the Terminator 2, or is it, well, how is this going to affect our lives? Because the unfortunate thing is there's really good things about AI. Like AI in like the medical field is going to be extraordinary. It's going to save bajillions of lives. But at what cost for the rest of our lives? Our democracies, our everything else. I mean, and our brains. I mean, my God, the brain rot is real. The brain rot's real, Julie.
The brain rot is real. All right. On that note, you guys, we are so grateful to you for joining us for our inaugural podcast here today. We are going to continue creating this content for you. As soon as we can make it, we will put it up.
Please find us on Apple Podcasts. We're not going to do Spotify because Spotify is allowing ICE to advertise on their platform, and we are no longer going to participate in that. So find us exclusively on Apple Podcasts, at least for now. And you can listen on your way to work or anywhere else. And otherwise, you can find us on YouTube. You can find the video version of this podcast on YouTube. And so like and subscribe. Find us there because that helps us tremendously in the algorithm to make sure that other people like you, like-minded people, get the information and the points of view that they deserve to hear.
Yep. And no bullshit. Okay, everybody. Right. Thanks very much. See you soon. Bye.